Thank you very much, Bita. It's nice to be with you. Given that we're a small group at this point, I'd love to just get some quick introductions to Laura and Peter, who I see have joined us. Can you guys just tell me a little bit about where you're from, what kind of work you do in 30 seconds, and give me a sense of who I'm talking to? That's always helpful.
Sure, this is Laura. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi Laura.
Hi, how are you? My name is Laura. I'm work with Miami-Dade College in Miami, Florida. And I am on the Change Making Impact Committee for our campus. I'm one of the co-chairs. So I'm fairly new to the whole change making initiative at our campus, just joined in the fall. Very excited to be on the conference and learning a lot of interesting things. And looking at, it seems definitely one of the key themes that I've identified throughout the conference is sort of the systems change component and how important that is to change making initiatives. You know, if you work on an institution that is not open or accessible to making change, then it's going to be pretty hard to really effectively bring a change making movement. So interested to see what this workshop's about.
Good. Yeah, I'll definitely spend some time on the system change efforts that we've been working on. So thanks for highlighting your interest in that, and I'll make sure that we spend plenty of time discussing some of that. Peter.
Yeah, Jordan. Yeah, good to see you. And Bita also. Good to see you, Bita. Yeah, so I am associated with a couple of foundations, and we have been funding experiential learning in universities and high schools, among other things. So, and including Ashoka U as well. So system change is a subject near and dear to my heart. Easier said than done. So it's always good to hear new perspectives on it.
Yeah, thank you. Look forward to doing that. And thanks for joining us. Muthoni, we're just spending, because it's a small group, it's growing, I see, so we might not have a chance to do this for everybody, but we do have a good hour and stuff. Just a few seconds of like where you're calling from, why you tuned in, so we can get to know each other.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm calling from Nairobi and very interested in system change. Moving from social entrepreneurship, because I'm a student, I'm a doctoral student, and I'll be writing something about social entrepreneurs and the innovations and the changes they make. So that's why I'm part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ricardo, same thing, just a couple minutes, where you're from, why you in. Yeah, I think we're here. I think you're tuning in, Ricardo. We don't hear you. I'm not sure if you're on mute or something. Give you a few more seconds to tune in. I'm going to switch over to Ken. Ken, because we don't hear you, Ricardo. I'm sorry. Just a quick introduction, where you're from, why you tuned in.
Yes, I came from Japan. I'm in Japan. Time 2 a.m. And so that's why I'm here. I'm interested in system thinking and the system change. That's why I'm here. So I'm sorry, I hadn't read the book Dare to. I'm sorry, something. Good. But if you don't mind, so I'm still sitting in the session. Can I do that?
Absolutely, yeah. It's not required. It's not required reading to participate. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah. So let's get started. I'm going to start with. So let me just give you a quick sense of what we're going to do today. given the introductions, it seems like the group is particularly interested in system change. So I'm going to skew most of our time and effort to that. And what I'll do is I'll sort of introduce my story, if you will, and my work by way of a few stories. Talk a little bit about the book that I wrote, Dare to Matter, which sort of informs a lot of my work. Then talk a little bit briefly about the social enterprise that I started called Vision Spring, that was a classic kind of social enterprise that created an enterprise to solve a particular problem. Saw the wonderful results we were getting with that organization, but also understood the limits. And once I understood the limits, the drive to create more of a system change approach to trying to solve the same problem. And then talk about the organization called Alliance, which is that system orchestrator organization that we started about 5 years ago. So my story starts when I was 23 years old. I was sitting in front of a 7-year-old boy. His name was Raul, and Raul was blind, and he was attending the school for the blind. And I was sitting in front of him to examine his eyes because I was a student studying to be an eye doctor. And I joined an organization that brought eye care to underserved populations in Latin America. And Raul was my very first patient. And after looking at him, we realized something quite miraculous, and that was that he wasn't blind, that he was just extremely nearsighted and needed a very, very strong pair of eyeglasses. And we bought thousands of glasses categorized by strength and went to the strongest box and found a pair that was almost his exact match. And I was the lucky person who put that first pair of glasses on Raul's face. And you can imagine that moment when the lenses lined up with his eyes and he saw for the first time. It was a profound moment that fundamentally changed both of our lives. I like to say that I gave him his vision and he gave me mine, because I knew at that moment that I wanted to do more of that. I knew that if I could replicate that moment over and over again with other people like Raul in the world, that I would be successful. And there's a wonderful quote by Mark Twain who says, "The two most important days of your life are the day that you're born and the day that you find out why." And that was the day that I found out why. So fast forward from that moment on, I became sort of obsessed with this idea of, my God, there are lots of people in the world who are visually impaired or blind, not because of some terrible eye disease, but because of the need for a pair of glasses, a technology that's been around for 700 years. Even though it's been around for 700 years, it still hasn't distributed or disseminated to 90% of the people in the world who needed it. So I kind of got obsessed with trying to figure out, well, how do I bridge that gap of access? And so that led me to start an organization called Vision Spring, which I can tell you a little bit about. And through that work as a social entrepreneur, we had a lot of success, and a lot of different organizations were interested in hearing about our story. And so I found myself speaking at a lot of universities, whether it was undergraduate or business schools, to talking about social entrepreneurship. And in speaking to those groups, almost invariably, no matter where I was in the country or in the world, when the question and answer session started, there was always a similar question that was on the minds of the students. And it went something like this. It was like, I just spent 4 years and a lot of money to get this wonderful education. And I want to use that education to have a successful life, but I don't want to do that at the expense of my soul. I don't want to do that at the expense of having a meaning or purpose in my work. And how can I balance both, if you will, money and meaning? How can I live a good life, but also do it in a way that is contributing something to the greater world? And that was the impetus of writing this book, Dare to Matter, because there seemed like there was a very universal struggle of trying to figure out how to integrate the demands of an expensive world to have a life with a family and all the demands that that requires, but also to do it in a way that is not so self-focused and not just about me and about ways in which you can improve the world. And how do you integrate that? And what the book really talks about is that as a human beings, we have two fundamental drives. One is to take care of ourselves and our families and have a nice life. But the other is to care for something bigger than ourselves so that we leave the world a better place because we are in it. And then the question becomes, well, how do you do that? How do you integrate those two very important drives? And that's really one of the main themes of the book. The other main theme of the book is the theme of the importance of listening to your inner wisdom and your inner voice. So often, I find that our students, they've been told by their parents, by the school administrators, by society, that there's a single lane to success in life, that you've got to go to these schools, you've got to work at these firms to be successful. And often those pathways are not necessarily in line with what your inner voice might be telling you. Is that I might not want to go to those schools. I might not want to work at those kinds of organizations. I might want to have a different life. And so the book talks about the importance of listening to your inner voice and celebrating it, because you were put on this planet for a very particular reason. And if you don't listen to your inner wisdom, you'll end up living somebody else's life. And that is often one of the great tragedies, is that people wake up too late. You know, they're in their 40s and 50s and realize that they lived the life that their parents wanted them to live, or their mentors wanted them to live, but not the life that they wanted to live. And so the book talks about the importance of capturing that that important element of who you are. And for me, that change, that moment really started when I met Raul. I saw that moment as a miracle. And I'll talk a little bit about, I'll read a little case, a little part of the book that talks about that miracle. So bear with me, it's just less than a minute of the book. I believe that miracles are the beginning of a story, not the end. They're the gateway to something bigger than anything we could have imagined. Extraordinary occurrences that don't exist for their own sake, but that are meant to point you in a direction of something just as extraordinary, a greater goal, a hidden strength, an undreamed dream. Miracles are a gateway that remain largely incomplete if we don't step through. And so the question I often ask myself is, why did that moment capture me so much? Why was it seen as a miracle that really directed my life in a whole new way? And one thing that we also talk about in the book is something called having a prepared heart. And so I often talk to students about the importance of a prepared heart. And what I mean by that is having a heart that's prepared for miracles to happen. It's almost like an antenna, that if you don't have an antenna, you won't tune into things that are happening. And if I didn't have the predisposition going into that moment of knowing that I wanted to live a life that was not all about me, or not about how many cars I had, but wanted to live a life that had meaning to the greater world, I might not have been tuned into that radio, if you will. I might not have been tuned into that channel. And that moment I had with Raul, the 7-year-old boy who I returned his vision to, would have been a cool story, or would have been a moment that I shared with my friends or my kids in the future, but it wouldn't have been something that fundamentally changed the direction of my life. And the reason I was able to capture it is because I went into the world with a prepared heart. So one of the things I always talk about to students I speak with, and we talk about in the book, is if you're looking to live a life of change making, one of the first steps is to start to walk through the world with a prepared heart. Start to sort of look for those miracles that might naturally unfold in front of you. Because if you don't have a prepared heart, you might not recognize that miracle as it is meant to be recognized. So that's a little bit about the book. We have many different chapters. We have another interesting chapter that we called Discover the Need That Needs You Most. It's a chapter that talks about how we have particular skills that can be matched with needs out there, and discovering that need that needs you most based on who you are and your skills and your interests is very critical. We have another component to that. We talk about the need that needs you and feeds you. So even though the need might be the need that needs you most and is well designed to correlate with your particular skill set, it also has to feed you. If it isn't something that motivates you and that burns in you, then you won't be able to last, because as we all know, change making is not a sprint, it is a marathon. And the engine of change making is or the motor, I should say, of change making is your heart. That you have to have a prepared heart. You have to have that engine that sustains you through all the ups and downs that you're going to have. So you both have to find the need that needs you and the need that feeds you. So let me talk a little bit about the need that needed me and the need that ended up feeding me. I'll talk a little bit about Vision Spring, the social enterprise, and then we'll spend the balance of this time talking about system change, because that's what most people seem to be interested in. And again, if you're at all interested in the concept of the book, again, it's called Dare to Matter: How to Make a Difference Now. And I co-wrote it. I was the principal author, and I co-wrote it with a rabbi who brought in a lot of interesting wisdom from all different cultures into the book. So yeah, please read it if you have interest personally, or it's also a great book for high school students, college students, graduate students who are trying to figure out their pathway to make a change in the world. So there I was in front of Raul, 7 years old, first time he saw, and had that miracle of a moment. That week was an extraordinary week. We saw 2,000 patients. And when we got back home, we analyzed the data, and we realized that of the 2,000 patients, 70% of them came to us because they just needed a pair of glasses. The other 30% came to us for a whole slew of medical reasons, cataracts or glaucoma or eye diseases. But 70% came because they needed a pair of glasses. And half of those, 700 of the 2,000, came to us who needed the kind of glasses that just in America you could buy as a consumer product. They were just we call it cheaters or reading glasses that you can buy in the pharmacy because you can't see up close. And what I started to recognize was that huge numbers of people who were in their 40s and 50s, who were masters of what they were doing, whether they were weavers or tailors or artisans or mechanics, were falling out of the workplace. These were poor people all over the world who were using their eyes and hands as their way of making a living. And they were falling out of the workforce, not because they didn't have skills or not because they weren't healthy, but just because they couldn't see up close. And their work started to fail, and the quality of their work went down, and they couldn't keep up with the people in the factory next to them. And all they needed was a pair of simple ready-made reading glasses that I knew I could source in China for less than $1. And I thought that was a ridiculous state of affairs. And so I started the idea of, well, why couldn't we just train local women to start small businesses selling eyeglasses? Because the other thing I saw as I worked around the world was that there was a huge amount of underemployment or unemployment among women. So I said, well, why couldn't we just take those women and train them how to become barefoot eye doctors to help distribute these simple ready-made reading glasses? It wasn't very complicated. Again, in most developed parts of the world, that's a consumer product. We created a method to train women who had 4th grade to 8th grade education how to start small businesses selling eyeglasses to their neighbors. They would make a little money doing it, and their neighbors could then sustain their livelihoods through better vision. And it was a win-win situation all around. And certainly there were tons of challenges, as you can imagine. But long story short is the idea, after many iterations and lots of pushing rocks up hills, started to work. And we saw more and more people demanding glasses. We saw more and more entrepreneurs coming to take this job. And over time, we went from 18 women in India, which we started the program with in South India. And now we have trained and we have over 30,000 what we call vision entrepreneurs in 23 countries around the world. And we went from selling 800 pair of glasses the first year to well over 1.3 or 4 million at present each year. So we've scaled this wonderful social enterprise, and this is only one of the models that we use. We also go into, at Vision Spring, we go into factories, and we make sure that all the factory workers can see. We go into tea farms, and we make sure all the tea pickers can see. So again, that link between vision and livelihood is so critical. And so we've partnered with big companies like Levi Strauss and West Elm and Target and Tata and other companies to ensure that farmers and factory workers can see up close to do their work. We also have big programs in road traffic safety, where we make sure that one of the leading causes of road traffic fatality is poor vision. We did some analyses in India and Ghana, and we saw that over 10% of commercial drivers were visually impaired and would not pass the vision test. And so you can imagine how that impacts on road traffic safety. So we have big programs with like Shell Oil, where we're examining 300,000 commercial drivers in India to make sure that they get their proper vision and glasses so that they can see on the road safely. And then we have a third program where we work with schools to make sure kids get their first pair of glasses so they can see to learn. There's lots of evidence that's pretty obvious that if you can't see, it's more challenging to learn. And so we go into schools, and we have large school programs to ensure that middle school and elementary school children have the access to affordable glasses. So those 3 programs are See to Learn, See to Work, and See to Be Safe. Now, in doing that, we've created, a wonderful organization. We have over 300 folks, full-time people working with us across the world. We have a budget over $10 million. We're helping over 1 million plus people every year get glasses. And we all have, we're all very proud of what we've accomplished together at Vision Spring. But what we also recognized, and I recognized, was that it's a drop in the bucket. What we've learned over time is that Raul is not alone. Visual impairment and blindness, the leading cause of visual impairment and blindness together is uncorrected vision that can be corrected with glasses. And believe it or not, there are 1 billion people on our planet who are visually impaired or blind. Again, not because of an eye disease, but just because they need a pair of glasses. And so when I learned about the fact that the numbers were just so staggering and we were making just such a drop in the ocean, I recognized that we needed to change our strategy. We needed to move more to a system change strategy to scale the work. So as Vision Spring scales from 1 million to 2 million to 5 million people that we reach each year, which I'm confident we will, it still remains just a small drop in the bucket of the overall need. And what became very clear to me is that if we're going to reach hundreds of millions of people, let alone billion people, we needed to engage governments and the private sector. Those were the only 2 sectors of society that could, on a sustainable way, reach hundreds of millions or billions of people. And so what we realized also was that organizations like Vision Spring which were very innovative, have created wonderfully innovative models of how to deliver eye care services less expensively, but are having a challenge scaling them. And so how can we take these innovative models that the NGOs have created and embed those models into government structures and have national governments adopt those models? How can we get companies, corporations to adopt these models of delivering eye care services and products to the emerging middle class and base of the pyramid consumer in a sustainable way? How can we also work to increase the knowledge and the awareness of this problem? Most people in the health space never knew this was a problem. That we were able to get a New York Times article that ended up on the front page of the Sunday Times a few years ago, and it was entitled "The Largest Health Problem You Never Heard of," because people don't know that over 1 billion people are visually impaired and blind and just need a pair of glasses. So we started this organization called Alliance to address all of these things, to bring the governments in, to bring the private sector in, to bring the NGO community together in a more coordinated fashion, to bring the movers and shakers in the global development community, folks who worked at places like the World Bank and IMF and large multilateral and bilateral institutions, to recognize that the lack of vision was a significant problem, not health problem, but a global development challenge because of the impact that poor vision had on learning, the impact it had on economic development and livelihoods and productivity, the impact it had on road traffic fatality and all the costs associated with that. So we launched the Alliance with that stated goal to change the systems, to try to change the underlying challenges that kept that problem in place. And so the first thing we did is we brought together a collection of around 30 leaders in different parts of the problem, if you will. We brought in some NGO leaders, we brought in some folks at the multilateral level, at the government level, at the corporate level, and we sat them around the table and we said, is there a need for an organization like Alliance? And if so, what should it do? What are the activities that it should do? And when we brought that group together, it was really important because it gave them the sense that we were not dictating to them that we had the answers, but we had all the right questions. And they saw that we wanted to, in earnest, solve the problem. We wanted to lead from behind and put them out front. As we often talk about, the currency of system change is trust. And so how could we build trust with these individuals so that they took ownership of the problem and they became part of and partners with us to solve the problem? So we sat around that table, and the communication that we got from them was twofold. One was, yes, we think that an organization like Alliance should exist. It's important. But two is that it should actually do something that's not just advocacy, but actually do something that would result in more people seeing concretely. And it also should not go after pools of resources that already exist that we rely on to do the work that we do. They wanted to make sure that we were bringing in new resources. So the Alliance launched with the idea of doing two broad things. One was to make the case for why vision mattered in the global development agenda, why it should be placed more centrally on the global development agenda, and to influence actors in governments and multilateral agencies and so forth to make that case. And the second was to create what we call evidence labs, which were demonstration projects to show that if we were successful in releasing significant pools of capital from the global development community, that there would be absorptive capacity for those resources to actually scale, and that there were large-scale government and private sector interventions that would be able to use those resources in a responsible and impactful way. So that's what we set out to do. And so the first thing we did on the making the case for why this issue matters is we wrote a white paper. It was called Eyeglasses for Global Development, Bridging the Visual Divide. And again, here we were very strategic, and we got that white paper to be co-published between us and the World Economic Forum. And we were invited to Davos to release that paper. And we specifically wanted the World Economic Forum behind it because who were the two groups that we were trying to influence? We were trying to influence governments, and we were trying to influence the private sector. And so what better place to go to influence those two sectors at the highest level, but to the World Economic Forum. And so we wrote that piece, and it was received very well by both our community as well as the global development community, and it started some very important discussions. One very important discussion led us to the US government, and through some hard work for many years, we were able to engage Congress, both the House and the Senate, to understand the importance of this issue area. And vision, one thing about vision that's nice is that it's completely apolitical. You know, everyone values their vision, no matter what side of the political spectrum you fall on. Everyone understands that vision is a critical input to health and wealth and productivity and a full life and your well-being. And so we got very strong support from both the House and Senate on both the Democratic and Republican side to try to do something about this. And we first got language in the Foreign Appropriations Bill in the United States, and then over time that led to our first earmark of funding from the US government. And again, we started with the US government for strategic reasons. If you're going to try system change, you want to try to move institutions that matter and can really move the needle. And the US government is, as you know, is the largest funder for global development work. And it also, at least it used to be, I don't know if I can say it now, but it used to influence other countries to follow. And so we're very glad to report that after many years of working with the US Congress, we now have an earmark that reoccurs every year for about $3.5 million to go specifically to vision across the world for eyeglass development. Now we're talking about significantly increasing that. We're in conversations to add a zero to that number on an annual basis. And we've gotten indications that it's not a crazy thought, but that we need to demonstrate that as the resources start to flow, that they are leading to real impact. And if they do, we have gotten clear communication that there's deeper pools of money potentially available for this kind of thing if it's shown to really make and affect change. So that's one big area that we work. We've also working with the World Bank, and through our hard work with the World Bank, we have got them to understand the importance of vision, and they have honed in particularly on the role of vision in relationship to inclusive education, because the bank is putting more and more resources toward inclusive education, and they understand that if you want to include everyone in the education system, and 10% of the children are not able to see the blackboard across the world, in some societies it's 5%, in other societies it's as high as 25 or 30% or higher, then you have to make sure that children who are myopic, who are nearsighted, get a pair of glasses. Now, in some societies where a lot of learning occurs close up with books and computers, being nearsighted is not as disadvantageous to a poor society where all the learning happens on the blackboard in front of you, 5, 10, 20 feet away from you, and the nearsighted children are at a huge disadvantage. And so what we find is many kids fall out of school, not because of a lack of ability, but just because they can't see, and they end up back on the farm when they're 12 years old, and their futures are less open to them. So one big chord again of our system change effort is influencing these large actors that can really move the needle in terms of resources and political will that are given to this issue area. Let me talk a little bit about the other chord, which is our evidence labs. And then I'd love to have, if people are willing to engage in some question and answers, so I'm not just speaking at you for the full time, we can get to a question and answer session as well. On the evidence lab side, there we have two broad areas of work. One is our government work, and the other is our private sector work. First, our government work, and again, there we have our most advanced chord is with working with national governments to own the development and execution of national school eye health programs. It is our belief at Alliance that the first pair of glasses a child receives should be a public good because of all the things that we talked about. This is something that's good for the child, it's good for society in the long term. So we believe it should be the government's responsibility to provide their first pair of glasses as a public good, and that we need to create national school eye health protocols so that governments can lead and own these initiatives. Historically, it's been this school eye work has been done by NGOs in a piecemeal fashion, a little here, a little there, you know, these dozen schools, these 100 schools, but it's never been done on a fully nationalized basis. And Alliance has engaged with the Liberian government to create the first national school eye health program so that by the end of 2022, between 70 and 100% of the children of Liberia will have had their vision screened, and those who need glasses will get their glasses. And the key of that program is twofold. One is that it's owned and led by the governments, and it's funded over time by the governments. It gets input, technical input from a group of NGO players who are part of the Alliance community. We have 60 members, and a subset of them provide technical assistance to the Liberian government. But this is a government-led initiative that will be funded by them over time through their own funding and through the Global Partnership for Education funding, which is another big, the multi-billion-dollar fund for education that has teamed up with Alliance and others to ensure that this stuff, this vision work continues. So that's one big area, but even the bigger strategy there is to use Liberia as a demonstration project of how to engage a government on how to take ownership of such an activity, how to put the pieces in place to execute on it and deliver on it, and codify exactly how it's done and who the different players are and the different processes are. And we are very pleased to say that we have attracted now a group of partners to this program to start to scale it across the world. We have brought in groups like CHI, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, UNICEF, the World Bank, and Global Partnership for Education to be part of this, what we call National School Eye Health Accelerator Program. And we've already, we are able to say that our next country, going from a small country in West Africa to a more mid-sized country in East Asia, is going to be Vietnam, where again, numbers are a lot larger, the number of kids who are nearsighted is a lot higher, and we are going with that coalition to Vietnam, and then hopefully to many, many other countries. The Global Partnership for Education funds educational programs in 65 countries. So our list is long and deep, and we hope that over time it goes from 1 to 3 to 10 to 20 to 50 to 60. And we can now, and we can look back in 10 years and we can say that, you know, hundreds of millions of children are able to see today and learn better today because of this system change program. The last piece of the work that I'll talk about is our private sector work. Although we know that the government work is going to be critical, we believe that over time, the private sector will play the largest role in closing the gap and closing the market for needed eyeglasses. And so there, what we did strategically is we started by looking for private sector companies that were already had developed successful business models, profitable business models that expanded the marketplace to emerging middle class and base of the pyramid consumers. And in doing a global scan for such a business, we found one in Mexico. And here was an entrepreneur that started with one optical store in Mexico City. And over time, he's now scaled it to over 100 stores. They're very profitable, and they now have resources to scale to 300 stores. And so what we did is we went to that entrepreneur and we said, can we codify your business plan? Can we turn it into a blueprint and share it with other entrepreneurs across the world? And the reason we were interested in his model was that not only was he reaching down market, but more than half of his customers were first-time eyeglass wearers. So he was really expanding the market. He wasn't just taking people who were buying glasses at more expensive places and bringing them to his place. He was actually, more than half of his customers were first-time eyeglass wearers. So he was making a dent in that billion-person problem. And so we codified that. We worked with a university in the United States called Santa Clara University. They have something called their Entrepreneurship Replication Lab. And we created this blueprint. We searched and identified 4 entrepreneurs in Latin America to take up that business model, 2 in Chile, 1 in Peru, and 1 in Ecuador. They've gone through the training of that business model, of that blueprint. It was a 3-month training. And now we're in the process of them writing their business plan and going to the market to get it financed. And there, the overarching strategy is not just to create a couple of successful businesses in a particular area, but to create regional optical sectors where, just like if you turn back the clock 10, 15 years ago, off-grid solar was not an industry, but now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry that attracts huge amounts of resources from private equity firms, from the free capitalistic market to expand off-grid solar. We think optical is something similar. It's an issue area that affects billions. It is pro-development. The product and service is pro-development. And so we want to attract development finance institutions like the Development Finance Corporation of America, who we are having deep conversations with, to start to invest in the optical sectors in Latin America, East Asia, South Asia, Africa, across the world, to ensure that people have access to affordable vision services and glasses. So that's a little bit of the work of our system change organization. And probably what you'll be surprised to hear is that organization, all of that we're doing, and I even didn't touch on all that we're doing, but all of that work is being done by an organization that has a budget only a little bit north of $1 million and has 6 full-time staff. So the beauty of system change is that it's very strategic, and it can be very, it's got a lot of leverage to it. So you don't need to grow organizations to huge amounts. It's really more about strategy. It's more about influence. It's more about waking up collaborations and partnerships that were not there in the past. And so I'll stop there and see if people have any questions or comments, and love to be in dialogue. And if you have a question you want to put on your video, feel free to. If you want to stay video free, that's also fine. Thank you for tuning in and talking a little bit about system change and Dare to Matter. Anyone have some questions, or does anyone?
Know that
there's no way that,
I'm sorry. I think Andrea, you were speaking, but then we can't hear you anymore. So maybe try again.
request if it's
Sorry,
important. And I think
my
that for
microphone
these
was
cases,
open.
Yeah, I think we're having a little bit, Andrea, you want to give it a try again? It says, I see you said, sorry, your mic wasn't working or something, or was it open? If people don't have any questions or comments, you could all,
Can I say something?
Yes,
I have something to say, please.
Please, Muthoni.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, Jordan. I am very short-sighted. I've worn glasses since I was in kindergarten, so I resonate completely with what you have presented, and especially coming from the developing countries, it is not easy. And at the moment, of course, I am much older, and you can imagine the sight is weaker. In the -11s and 12s, and it's very expensive to get a pair of glasses. But at least I have an income, so that works. So I'm quite and I've heard of Vision Springs actually in the tea growing areas in our country. So I know a bit of what Vision Springs is doing in Kenya. So thank you very much about that. And also the approach, the model you have explained of bringing all this or many of the stakeholders on the table and saying that, you're leading from behind and you're influencing the large actors, that's also really nice. I am interested in or wondering how would you have attained some of those networks like the World Economic Forum and the World Bank and all of those people, they don't come along easily. So how did you leverage it? How do you access some of those? And then also having worked in South Sudan in the health sector, I understand many of in the public health sector, many of the eye issues and eye diseases were as a result of hygiene. So are you partnering with, apart from the demand side of issues, are you partnering with anyone who is working on prevention? Because we know for us, for developing countries, prevention is a large part of, just avoiding the cost in the first place. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments and questions. I'll answer the questions in just a second. I'd be interested, if you don't mind sharing, how much does a -11 pair of glasses cost for you?
Well, I don't mind sharing. The thing is, I have a -11, -12, and I'll try and get highlight, which means it's condensed. So maybe it's also a bit, maybe I'm doing a bit of aesthetics. So, but on average, it will be upward of 40,000 Kenya shillings. I think that's like $400, Okay. It's going to easily be upward of that, yes. Well, including the frame and everything, because you're not just getting the lens,
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And so this is the problem, right? I would imagine there are people in Kenya that $400 is the better part of their annual salary, let alone maybe monthly salary for middle class people, right? And so imagine having to spend 1 month of salary to half of your annual salary on a pair of glasses. It's just not going to happen. And so that's one of the, and Kenya is not alone, believe me. This is a problem across the world. And even if it was a simpler prescription, we see that it's very hard to access glasses for less than $50 to $150 in a lot of these societies. And even at $50, glasses it's just not going to happen if you're earning $1, $2, $3 a day. People through our research we see are willing to spend between $2,000 and maybe 4 days worth of work in order to buy a pair of glasses. So if you're earning $2 a day, you'll spend, you know, $6 to $8, maybe $10 at best on a pair of glasses. So it's been our effort to try to figure out how we can bring the cost of glasses down to the $4 to $6 range. And the good news is that we're successful in doing that. We know how to do that. And if you looked at the glasses that we sell in our community through Vision Spring or other members of Alliance, the $4, $6 glasses look like normal glasses. They're not contraptions. They don't look weird. They look like normal glasses. So this is a big problem. Is that it's been historically bifurcated between private sector companies that are selling $400 glasses, and therefore only very educated and well-to-do people in those societies can buy them. And on the other side, you had NGOs that were doing kind of charity work and giving out glasses often that were very ugly that people didn't want to wear because they looked so culturally inappropriate. So by having a social enterprise that was creating a proper market for them and started with the customer to see what their aspirations were to buy glasses, what could they afford, what was the style and color that they liked, and starting with a customer-centric perspective and one that took in the dignity of that person was an instrumental change in the marketplace and introduced something between the unaffordable glasses and the ugly charitable glasses. So thank you for highlighting that. In terms of how we had access to these networks, it was a combination of a number of things. You know, a lot of times system change entrepreneurs, if you will, as they say in America, it's not their first dance or it's not their first rodeo. The system change work is often done by individuals who have been trying to solve a particular problem for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And they realize that there's a different way to solve it. So in my case, you know, I had been at this for 20 years with Vision Spring, and through that had created a large network of funders, of influencers. I was privileged to be a Schwab Fellow, and therefore had access to the World Economic Forum and their people. I had done lots of work with the World Bank through a different disease called river blindness. So we knew people at the World Bank through that. And then we've worked on strategically finding the leverage points in the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate, and so it was a combination of my personal connections from our board and our directors, and my co-founder Liz Smith, her connections. So it was a combination of all of those things. And then in terms of the prevention question, you know, it's an excellent question. There is some prevention work being done in our field, and we support that. You know, there are some kids and people who are just going to be nearsighted no matter what. And Muthoni, with your prescription, you're genetically wired to be nearsighted. So no matter what we did to prevent that, you would.
True, that's true.
But there are other kids who their nearsightedness is a result of an environmental stress, all of the up close demands. And it's clear that even an hour or two of outside activity increases the well-being of a child's eyes. So kids who are nearsighted do better, and their nearsightedness progresses slower when they have outside activity and they get light and they are outside. Whereas in a lot of societies these days, the kids are put under so much pressure that they're in front of their books or computers and they're inside all day and they're not getting that. So we're trying to get the message out across to governments that it's critical for you to incorporate outside play in order to prevent myopia. And also reduce screen time and certain kinds of exercises when the kids are doing a lot of screen time.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments that people might have?
Here is my comment about your journey. So it's a surprising journey for me because I suppose you have a lot of time to stop and reflect on what you did. And so, okay, this is a top of the mountain. Okay, probably somebody take on the next challenge. And so here's my guess about the psychological situation when you stop thinking about what you did. So, but at the moment, so as a result, at the moment, you get over the psychological weakness. And then, so take another step forward to scale the next journey. So could you tell me about how did you get over your psychological weakness and or even so satisfaction or contention of your mind? So how did you override such a psychological state?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Ken. It's an important question. And I just want to make sure, I'm going to frame it back to you and make sure that I answer your question. I think what you're alluding to is that as social entrepreneurs, it's very natural to have a lot of psychological investment in the organization that you started. You have a lot of ego gratification as part of that, a lot of identity linked into that organization and that work. And so how does one remove themselves from that identity, that all that that success, if you will, and then give it all up and then start something completely different and start from scratch again? Is that sort of what you're driving at?
Yeah, so because frequently I ask my student, even so myself, when I take a meditation times, so okay, I'm going to write a new life statement, life vision, life a mission. So frequently
Alert from calendar. Ashoka Canada is inviting you to a scheduled Zoom meeting.
I'm sorry. Frequently I rewrite my vision statement, mission statement, when I feel saturation mind. So, but in your journey, so it seems to be easy to take another step forward. So how did you do that?
Yeah, I thanks again for that question. I think there are a number of elements. The first thing I would say is, even though maybe it sounded easy, it's not easy to make changes like that, because you do have a lot invested. But I think the fundamental answer, at least from my perspective, is that I've always been driven by solving the problem more so than creating institutions or creating something that's ego gratifying. it's always my fundamental drive has always been focused on the problem and the individuals and the injustice that I saw in the world. So I thought it was a complete injustice that there was a 7-year-old boy who was at the school for the blind who wasn't even blind. And it was all because there was a failure of the marketplace, as Muthoni was saying. The marketplace had failed him, society had failed him, and he was considered blind even though he wasn't. And then I realized that there were 1 billion people in the world who that injustice was being perpetrated against. These are people who weren't living up to their full potential. They were losing opportunities at work. They were losing opportunities at school. They were at higher risk of accidents, all because of something so simple. So to me, my motivation and drive was always keeping those people in mind, the many hundreds that I've met over the years, face to face, having that problem and solving that problem. So that would be one thing, that I always separated my ego from Vision Spring, for instance. Even though I was the founder of Vision Spring, I didn't own Vision Spring. My identity wasn't about Vision Spring. My identity was being a problem solver, you know? And so after doing Vision Spring for many years and seeing the progress that we were making, one thing I realized, was that there were probably people who were better than me at taking an organization that was at a mezzanine stage and making it bigger. And so that maybe my particular skill sets were not perfectly aligned with the needs of the organization at the time. And I wanted the organization to be as strong as possible. So I started to think about bringing other people in who were smarter and better at me for that next stage. But then I also said to myself, okay, I might not be the right person for that, but what are my superpowers? What are the areas where I can be most of service to solving the problem for those people who are living that injustice of poor vision? And Alliance was sort of the answer. It was, you know, I had spent time in the private sector. I had spent time at foreign policy think tanks. I had spent time creating a social enterprise. And the system change orchestration work really kind of brought together all of those different components of my career into life, into a new organization. So I think when last thing I would say is that when you're moving away from something that was so important to you, it's important to move away from it in a manner that you're moving toward something, that you're being pulled to something new and exciting as well. I think the people who run into problems, who have done wonderful work in the social space, when they leave their organizations that they find, is not sort of being pulled, not knowing what that next pull is, and finding themselves a little bit unrooted.
I think this, you are a person who be a firefighter, or who plant the apple tree over the naked mountains and naked countries. And this is my job. This is my job. This is my job. Every time you take on the next challenge, so you feel, this is my job. This is my job. So before you think about what I'm doing, so this is my job. This is my job. Yes. So this is my feeling. But so I'm so glad to hear that story from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for bringing that important psychological element into the conversation, because a lot of times in the social enterprise and change-making space, we talk very tactically and strategically, but we don't necessarily cover the more human psychological aspects of the work that we all do. So thanks for bringing that in. So we have a few more minutes. We're not at all obligated to
And Jordan, there's
Yep.
a great question from Ricardo in the chat. Who
Oh, I'm
says,
seeing that now.
yeah,
Towards a post-pandemic world, what do you expect? Are we going back to normal, or are we going to have big changes? Well, this is just my, I'm not an expert. I'm not a futurist. I'm not an expert in this, but I can give you my perspective of how I'm seeing this. I think the answer, if it can be, is both. I think that there is going to be a new normal that is closer to normal than a completely revolutionized society. But I think there are going to be within that some parts of our society that will experience big changes. I think, again, I can speak for me personally, that, there are Sigmund Freud said, since we were talking psychologically before, Sigmund Freud said, everybody needs love and work to be happy. And I think that our society was so skewed toward work before the pandemic that a lot of people rediscovered the relational aspects of their lives, their children, their spouses, their families, their parents, their closest friends. And I think one of the big changes is that relational aspects of life are going to be prioritized more than in the past. And people will be more apt to say to their work, no, I'm not going to fly halfway around the world to meet someone for 3 hours or one day and miss my son's birthday, because I can do it on Zoom. And so I think from a relational perspective, this is going to have some big changes. I think it also brought up that's on sort of the more positive relational note. I think on the more negative relational note, it's also brought a lot of people to the consciousness that their primary relations are not strong, and they are living parallel lives, and they were sort of using their busyness as a way to sort of coexist with their spouse or their family. And the reason they were able to sustain those relationships was because they were never around together. They never spent the time together. They were living these mutually parallel lives. And now they find, when they're sort of, if you will, forced to spend more time together, that they're not happy in those relationships. So I think there's going to be a lot of big changes when it comes to relationships, both on the positive side and negative side. Although I think by realizing the negative aspects of some of the relationships people have, it has a positive aspect in that they'll either work on those relationships and revalue them, or they'll move on and hopefully look for better ones. But I do think, and I live in New York City, I do see things creeping back very slowly to a little bit more normal. And I think we'll be able to go back to the theater at some point and go to music venues and sport venues and travel a little bit. And so I think lots of things will also go back to normal. Okay, well, we're pretty much there. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet all of you and to have this nice dialogue. Bita, thank you for hosting this, you and Ashoka. It's been a privilege, and you can reach me for people who might have interest in continuing a dialogue. Probably the simplest email is jcassillo@gmail.com, and I can just quickly put it in the chat. And then I see also that Bita put in a link to my book through Kensington, which is the publisher. And again, if people are interested in that, If you do have an opportunity to read it and you want to chat about anything in it,
It's just
send me an email and we'll continue the dialogue. Okay, Bita, thank you. I think you can close down. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
For tuning in.